All right, ready to roll?
Yep.
Okay. I'll call to order the June 8th, 2020 meeting of the Waynesboro City Council. And just remind citizens that you're welcome to participate in the public hearing and the citizen comment period by calling at the appropriate time. And that call-in number is 844-844-9200. And then when prompted, enter the access code for the meeting, which is 398145, and then hit the pound button. And from there, you'll hear Q&A session has started and press *6. You'll hear if you'd like to speak, press 1 to be added to the queue. After that, press 1. And then entering the queue, you'll hear an audio feed of the meeting as it's happening. And then once you're in that queue, just wait to be prompted by the moderator and then share your comments with council. And then just a reminder that folks, that though the pre-recorded prompts refer to questions, the public hearing and citizen comment portions of the meeting are a time for council to simply hear your comments. So with that, we'll move on to item number 2, which is adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there a second?
I can second that.
Okay, thank you. Jeannie, are you muted still? I think you're still muted. Yeah.
I had said I seconded, but
Okay. So we've got a motion that properly seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 3 is the consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
so move.
Great. Thank you, Jeannie. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 4 are matters from council members. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share this evening?
I would just like to share that I did attend the EDA virtual session, and also the since I'm the liaison right now for the Planning Commission, I was with them also and was interested in some of the things that they were talking about, especially since they're talking about the update for the Port Republic Road Plan. Also, they brought up some issues on the basic city, I guess, neighborhood plan. That was interesting. They didn't have too much to do. They do have another meeting scheduled, but it was quite interesting. So I just want you to know I was working.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share? No. I'll just read a statement. I have to talk to Vice Mayor Henderson today, and I think Ms. McCutcheon to share just an acknowledgement that our nation and our community are deeply hurt and disturbed by the murder of George Floyd, and that we call for swift justice for those individuals responsible. I also just want to relay our thanks to individuals and groups who have protested and demonstrated peacefully in our city and in the surrounding area. The city remains committed to supporting events like our unity marches and celebrations, increasing participation in local government through open houses, neighborhood meetings, and other vehicles for communication between citizens and the local government, participation in decision-making, transparency in decision-making, and accountability for all individuals. These opportunities strengthen local governance through trust and confidence. You know, events such as those in Minneapolis undermine the confidence that folks have in law enforcement and in the government in general. The record of performance of our Waynesboro Police Department, I think, provides an excellent example of professional policing and reflective of the humility, respect, compassion that the officers of the Waynesboro Police Department demonstrate in service to our community each and every day. But that said, nonetheless, the council is willing to and wishes to explore vehicles of improved communication and transparency that fortify trust in our Waynesboro Police Department and our local government. And we believe that this can successfully be accomplished in an environment where concerns can be enumerated, heard, and considered with strengths and opportunities for improvement. So with that, I just offer that for council's consideration and acknowledgement.
I would just like to respond and say I'm glad that we said something, because all of you, or maybe not all of you, know my son Tommy. who was in law enforcement in Michigan, was 2 years with the Waynesboro Police Department, and was very proud of him. Thank you for that.
Great. Thank you, Jeannie, very much. All right, moving on to item number 5 is to hold a public hearing to receive comment and consider introducing an ordinance assessing cost in each criminal or traffic case for funding of courthouse security pursuant to Virginia Code Section 53.1-120. Mr. Hamp.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and members of council.
No.
The Code of Virginia, Section 53.1-120 authorizes cities and counties in the Commonwealth through its governing body to assess fees in each criminal or traffic case in its district and circuit courts. Only those defendants which are convicted of a violation of any statute or ordinance are assessed the fee. The city currently uses this funding to finance part-time personnel in the sheriff's department. Those part-time personnel man the entrances to the courthouse and operate the magnetometers, affording additional security for the employees in the court and patrons of the courthouse. The General Assembly has authorized localities that may increase the fee, which is presently $10 per charge, to $20 per charge. And the city, if the increase is approved, would continue to use these funds to offset the cases or the expenses of these part-time security officers. Presently, the city collects about $16,000 to $17,000 annually in these fees. Our expenses, however, for furnishing the part-time security run about $50,000 to $52,000. Again, the ordinance presented for your consideration would increase the fee from $10 to $20. And again, we would make a commitment that those funds would be used to offset the expenses of courthouse security. I would note that some observers of the fee have offered some criticism, but I would say that managers and sponsors of the fee suggest that the fee functions more as a user fee and assesses the expense of furnishing court and judicial services to those citizens and individuals who are required to use those services, and allows the general taxpayer funds to support more commonly enjoyed services such as police, parks, libraries, public education, etc. So presently, in the current configuration, taxpayers pay about 2/3 of those part-time wages, and users of the court pay about 1/3. If we approved, or if the council saw fit to approve the increase, those ratios would flip, and the users of the court would pay about 2/3 of the expense, and the taxpayers' share would be reduced to about 1/3. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Would make a note to the mayor that I think our outline for process this evening may not include a public hearing, but we need to conduct a public hearing on this matter once we conclude questions and conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Are there any questions for Mr. Hamp?
Mayor Short, I got one question to Mr. Hamp. Did we check with other jurisdictions locally to see what their fees are?
We did not, no, sir.
I would be curious just to see where we stand with them. We might be way under. I'd just like to know.
Sure. If I might suggest that we can proceed with the public hearing and introduction, and I'll bring that information back at our next meeting, or furnish it between now and our next meeting. And if it has bearing on your decision, you can adjust when we get to that second consideration.
That sounds good.
Yeah, wonderful.
Mr. Hamp, I also had a question. How do the fees, the court fees that you're mentioning, how does that work if someone is delinquent to other fees or fines, and what does that add to the picture there?
So over time, our position, the city's position, the court's position in collection has fallen. And in fact, the Commonwealth has removed certain collection measures. So the likelihood that we collect fees immediately is reduced. I spoke with the clerk of circuit court this morning, and she was optimistic, however, that over time we do carry some success. But you're right, our position is not prime immediately, and over time we don't enjoy a 100% collection rate.
Well, I guess my question was more to the person who is being charged this fee.
Right.
If it is not paid, how does that add to complications, or, I mean, or if they are able to pay a portion of a fine, when does this come off? The beginning or the end?
I believe it comes off at the end, but I would perhaps recommend that I'll do some additional research on that item as well and bring that information back to you when I report back with Mr. Allen's question.
Thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Hamp? Great questions, guys. Appreciate that. So having no additional questions, we'll open up the public hearing regarding the matter. Do we have anyone on in the queue?
We do not currently have anyone in the queue, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance increasing the court security fee? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right, this ordinance will receive final consideration at our June 22nd meeting. Thank you. Item 6 is to receive a report from Mr. Greg Hitchen, Director of Economic Development and Tourism, regarding a proposed CARES Act funded small business relief grant program. Mr. Hitchen.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, good evening. Out of the 5,000 business establishments in the Stanton, Waynesboro metropolitan statistical area, over 4,300 of them have 19 or less employees. So our largest employment sectors are in the retail and hospitality accommodation sectors. This combination of small business with low and the highest affected sectors creates a recipe for significant negative economic impact for our economy. The proposal you have before you tonight is to assist these small businesses by offering much needed cash to infuse into their business to help offset the loss of revenue caused by their business closures due to COVID-19. Using funds from the CARES Act, we are proposing to set up a business grant program. This grant program is open to all for-profit Waynesboro businesses in good standing with 20 or less full-time equivalent W-2 employees. Proposing that the grant funds be used for expenses caused by the required closures, which would include mortgages, buying equipment to get reopened, payroll, non-city utilities, etc. The Economic Development Authority of Waynesboro would administer the grants and review the applications as they are submitted. And it is our proposal that if you so agree tonight, that we would open the application process on Wednesday, this Wednesday, June 10th, close the application process on June 22nd, providing a week to review the applications with disbursements being made beginning July 1st. You have the complete package of information in front of you. I would welcome an opportunity to answer any questions you might have and appreciate your consideration of introducing an ordinance to fund this business grant program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hitchen. Any questions, Greg?
I did have a question, Mr. Hitchens. Does this interfere or complicate those businesses that may have gotten payroll protection plan outlays already?
That's a very good question, and we are opening it only to those businesses who did not receive the PPE or the EIDL grant program.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Any other questions? Greg, I have a few. First is appreciate the application and providing that for everyone's review. One of the thoughts, just as a friendly suggestion, is at the top you sort of lay out who is ineligible, but then as you kind of go through the questions, we ask the question without restating. It might be helpful. I think I know it would have been for me. For me, if I were trying to fill it out, and I'm worried about what payroll looks like in a couple of weeks, is to say if you've got a PPP, then you're not eligible.
Don't even bother, right?
Yeah. So
Make that more clear, sure.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yep.
The next was regarding the Max Grant Award. Have you all figured that out about what's your minimum and then your maximum?
We think the maximum should be $10,000. We
Okay.
think it's important to fund businesses enough to make a difference. If you give somebody who needs $1 a quarter, it's not going to help them a whole lot. So we want to make sure that they're funded enough. We are going to ask them for a line-by-line item of what they're going to use the funds for. That's the very last question on the application. That'll give the reviewers an opportunity to see how they're using the funds. And we do fully expect to have more than 10 applications at $10,000. So that'll give us an opportunity to look and see and make judgments based on how they're going to apply it. And also important, you may have noticed a question in there. We're asking what their gross revenues were last year to this year. That'll give us another opportunity to judge to see what impact COVID had.
Great.
So no minimum amount, except that too little is not going to make a difference. But I think the maximum amount should be $10,000.
Great, thank you. And I know that we had some conversations with staff and then some colleagues about a larger set aside up front. But after thinking about it over the weekend, at least where I'm at, is I think starting it off where we're trying this out and we're going to see how it works and how it's effective. Council can always consider additional support through that. And I just, as we're talking about this in $100,000, for those that might be watching in cyberspace or watch this on video, these funds are coming from the CARE Act. They're coming with CARE Act distribution that can only be used for these purposes. We cannot absorb them in our general fund and the loss in revenue that we've realized, but we can use it to support our business community. And so I appreciate staff's diligence in really hopping on this. We just got the funds, not even a week ago, right? And appreciate standing up that application process and getting that going. So the one other thing that I would offer up, and maybe for council's consideration, is the disbursement. So right now we have a planned disbursement of July 1, and I would offer up for consideration to just get some feedback from my colleagues here about doing disbursement upon approval, rather than waiting on a fixed date. So when you have those reviews, you begin those reviews on the 22nd, and you approve one on the 22nd, and it makes sense and there's a need. Why wait another week?
If we built in time for that review process, not that we're not going to review them as we come along, but if we do have to make, judgments, say we get 50 applications and we're only going to approve 10, the first one we get may not be the best one. So we do want to make sure that we have a chance to review them all and allow for that time. So I fully agree that if we juggle all that stuff and make that determination on the 23rd, then we should be cutting checks on the 23rd, absolutely. But we wanted to make sure we had time to do the applications justice.
Yeah, no, that makes great sense. I wouldn't want to create an ordinance or an authorization that fixes you to a date that you're able to deliver those funds sooner. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome.
Mayor?
Yep.
If I could offer, we might need to amend your ordinance to deliver then. I think your ordinance is set up to deliver this in fiscal year 2021. So we would need to deliver sooner. You'd have to, when you adopt, declare that it's you're doing an emergency appropriation, so there's not a 10-day waiting period. Typically, an ordinance doesn't become effective for 10 days after its adoption. Let me, if we might, I'd like to consult just a moment with Mr. McCormick about whether we need to revise the ordinance here.
Yeah,
Okay.
is that good with everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah. If things are ready to go, you're right. There's no point in waiting. The fiscal year issue may complicate it. In terms of having to approve it to spend in this fiscal year versus July 1.
If you could give us just a second, let me consult with Mr. McCormick on the ordinance language.
Sure. With that, I'll use this opportunity to remind folks of the citizen comment period that'll be coming up. And again, we've got that call-in number of 844-844-9200. And the access code for the meeting is 398145. And you'll hit the pound button. You'll hear a Q&A session started, press #6, and then you'll be put into the queue.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. McCormick is revising the ordinance so that it would be, money would be available sooner. If you could give us just a second.
Sure.
I mean, I can be.
So, Mr. Mayor, what Mr. McCormick has done is to make the appropriation of the $100,000 of CARE Act's money to the Economic Development Business Grant Program effective for the year ending June 30th, 2020. So this would make the money available after the ordinance is adopted on June the 22nd.
Great, great. Any questions?
Well, just for clarification then, Mr. Shaw, would that
We're gonna want to
imply that the money needs to be dispersed before July 1st? Or could it be carried over into the new fiscal year?
If the money were not dispersed by the end of June 30, then we would have to have a new ordinance to reappropriate it in fiscal year 2021. So it'll have to be dispersed before July 1st.
Mr. Hitchens, does that sound like a better solution or worse solution?
It certainly makes the timing go a bit faster. It gives us a week to review everything, keeping in mind it's the Economic Development Authority Loan Committee, which is volunteers that are reviewing this. I certainly appreciate and understand the necessity to get the money out as quickly as possible, and I agree with that. I think it can be done. It just puts the onus for us to get it done quickly.
And as Mr. Shaw said, that we could always reappropriate if for any reason some of the funds were not dispersed by the first of or the end of June.
Right. And again, by the council meeting on the 22nd, the applications will have closed. We'll have an idea. We'll have a much better idea whether we have 50 or 11 applications that we're dealing with, and the speed at which that all can happen.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
if we're gonna stay with the fiscal year 2020, the ordinance will need to include that it takes effect immediate upon adoption by council.
Okay. So when we bring it back to 22nd, Melissa, that it goes into effect on the 22nd.
Yeah, that once it's adopted, it goes into effect. Otherwise, we'd have to wait the 10 days.
Right. Okay.
And does that need other language to make clear that it's because of emergency need, or is what Cameron just added sufficient, Melissa?
No, that's sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. I don't think we've ever paused that long. So I haven't paused that long in 4 years. So I appreciate it. I was reflecting back on I had never really heard a magnetometer before, so it's a new word. I'm going to look that up later. All right, so with that, we've appreciate the discussion, everyone. Are there any additional questions?
Accept that ordinance? Oh, questions.
Yeah. So is there a motion to introduce?
I will make that motion.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeannie. Any discussion? All right, so this ordinance will be given final consideration at our June 22nd meeting. Thank you all. Number 8 is communication, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Ham.
I don't have anything this evening, sir.
Great, thank you. Number 9 is citizen comment period. Do we have anyone on the line this evening?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So before we adjourn, can we talk a little bit, Mike, about next steps? You know, the stay-at-home order will have ended prior to our next meeting, and just wanted to kind of get a feel from my colleagues if and for you all too, Mike, if what your thoughts are about city building and potentially maybe promoting social distancing for having callers call in. But I am noticing local governments returning to their chambers, and just wanted to kind of get what your thoughts were.
So would you like the staff to go first, or were you thinking that that our elected officials would go first?
Well, I think I want to curious about what your thoughts are, but the status of the building, and just let that general thing. If really your lead in opening up public spaces.
So generally with this building, we've ordered some, we believe are essential supplies that we need prior to returning our employees to this building in terms of PPE, sanitation stations, masking supplies, and then also in some areas of public buildings will be furnishing engineered solutions such as sneeze guards. We too note that at least one neighbor anticipates returning their elected officials to live meetings. But I think we're seeing more elected bodies that are not quite ready to return. And I would say we want to be thoughtful, one, that our building is ready for employees and guests and elected officials to return. Then we have an additional consideration with respect to how we manage attendance at a meeting. And so that as we understand the governor's guidance, those events in which it's not possible necessarily to limit attendance by ticket issuance or otherwise, they present a tricky challenge for local governments. And we're contemplating how we would manage a public meeting at which there was significant interest in attendance, and how we would treat our constituents in that manner. And so that's a bit of a long-winded way to say that, one, we don't think that our building is quite physically ready to return to meeting in person. And two, pardon me, there are a couple of process questions that we are working through in terms of the executive order that we think inform responsible governance and setting a proper example for citizens.
That's
Terry,
yes. Yeah, Jeannie.
this is Jeannie. And me being senior of the council, I think it would be safer for me if I didn't meet in council at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's I've had a few questions from folks, and Mr. Hamp and I have had some conversations about the building, but I thought it would be good for the public consciousness to sort of relay our thinking and the rationale behind it. So I appreciate very much, Mike, that explanation, and certainly support that, and just offer to my colleagues if you all have anything else that you'd like to add related to that or any other matter.
Well, I would comment, as we have opened up, we have not seen a significant change in infection rate locally. But as things, as we get a week or two beyond the more open stance, we'll have to see if we do see an uptick in cases. And so again, I think it is prudent to wait another cycle perhaps on our meeting to see where things are headed, because as Mr. Hemp pointed out, deciding who can come in and who can't come in to try to limit the number of bodies in the chamber does become problematic, whereas it seems more fair to allow equal access electronically for now. Hopefully we'll start to see that the numbers are not going up, and that we can start to proceed back to more normal fashion at some point here.
Thank you all very much for indulging me. All right, with that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bruce. All those in favor say aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.